I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today is Friday, July 29th, 2022. Fridays, we call the program the Healing Circle, and we do this in conjunction with our friends at the African American Child Wellness Institute, which is led by Dr. Bravada Garrett-Akinsanya and her team of physicians and therapists, and we talk about health, mental health, whole body health, and healing. If you are interested or have comments or questions, we'd like to have you connect and be a part of the conversation as well. I want to begin by reaching out to my friend who's joining me from Bahia in Brazil, Maestre Yoji Sena, and also hello to my colleague, my writing partner, Brenda Gray. Good to see both of you this afternoon. We're going to be joined shortly by other members of our group, but let's start off with the conversation among us. Guys, good to see you both. How are you? Brother Maestre Yoji Sena, how are you? Sister Brenda Lyle-Gray.
Very happy to be here.
Me as well.
Yoji, how's your family? How's your son?
My son is doing very well in the possible. He's been in a artistical creation period. He's been done like 9 songs and painting pictures, experimenting with colors, things like that. Yesterday we went to take his Brazilian ID, so he was excited about that.
Was he born here in the U.S. or born there in Brazil? We were born here, right, in the U.S., right?
He was born over in Minnesota.
Okay.
But he has double nationality.
Did he have a chance to grow up learning to speak Portuguese or not?
Not learning. He was around, like when I was married to a Brazilian woman. So we spoke Portuguese home, but not taught him classes particularly. So he understands what's going on, but always being shy to speak. But when he speaks without accent, without the typical American accent.
Okay.
He picks up the melody from here quickly.
Mm-hmm. And so probably as a musician and as an artist, as a creative person, he connects with the musicality of the language and of the culture in a very natural, probably holistic way. And that probably comes across in how he attaches and attacks the language. I was reviewing some articles that I had written, Brenda. I think I sent you a copy of this document that I called. I'll even share it with you. I call it the McFarlane Ford Reader. And have you seen that?
Mm-mm.
Let me show it to you. I'm going to share my screen. And I was trying to post it on Nubia, on Narrative. I haven't figured out how to do that yet. But in reviewing it, I was just pleased in reviewing work that I'd done before some years ago. I'm going to share my screen. And
now, did Bobby contribute to it?
Yeah, Bobby and I write together. We co-author. So
that's great.
If you can see that, let's see, is it on the screen yet? Add to stream. Tell me when you can see it. There we go.
Got it.
So this piece is a piece I wrote. I forgot what year it was, but the title, King Elders Connect in Royal Visit to the Community. And this involved the visit of the king or the Fan of Bafut in Cameroon. Title for king is Fan. And this guy was His Royal Majesty Abumbi II. And he visited the Cameroonian community here, but through my contacts, I invited him to speak with some of the elders in the community. You might recognize Spike Moss there. You never met Spike. You've talked to him, right, Brenda?
No, I wrote a powerful piece on him, and I had no choice because he was just that good.
And Yoji,
I
you
mean,
probably know Spike, don't you?
Yes.
You know Spike from here, and you
Oh,
might know
yes.
these people here. But
powerful. Oh, I love it.
uh, we've had Dr. Hayden on. That's Dr. Peter Hayden to the left of the fond. To the right of the fond is former State Representative Randy Stanton, who's out of North Carolina, but he was the first or second Black person from the city of Minneapolis to be in Minnesota legislature. And he's just a powerful character and personality. And to the right of Randy Stanton is Reverend Ian Bethel, who's been on the program before as well. He's part of the negotiating team for the consent decree, looking at the problem of police brutality. And on the far left of the fond is Clarence Hightower, who at this time was the head of the Minneapolis Urban League. And
Great picture.
and that's me interviewing. So I used to do this show in all kinds of places. This was a show kind of being produced at a neighborhood restaurant called Sunnyside Cafe. And it was a good event. People from the neighborhood. Let me scroll down some. This is Carl Eller in the hat. And Carl Eller is the Minnesota Viking, of legendary fame. So cool to have him there. And
Who's the
there's
lady
Spike
in
is
the
again.
green?
But these are nice pictures. And this is one
Those
of our
are
previous
beautiful
photographers,
pictures.
Saluki and his grandson, Carl. The woman who owned the cafe, she and her husband owned Sunnyside Cafe, along with King Abumbi II, the Fond of Bafut. And so, but what I love is being able to present stories. And this
Mhm.
is a beautiful presentation. And this piece, Brenda, is a piece that I wrote about me growing up in Kansas City.
Oh, please send both of those to me.
And
I'd love to see. Oh, especially this one.
Yeah. And the idea is that I talk about when I was born, they didn't allow Black people to go to a regular hospital, to go to General, but General was substandard, subpar, and they treated us like we deserve substandard, subpar care. And so my parents went to University of Kansas Medical Center across the state line. That's where I was born.
Across the state line too.
And a lot of people did that because they for dignity,
Well,
So
they
I wrote
only
about
had one Black doctor, Al.
Yeah. And I mentioned our friend, your friend and mine, Brenda Isom. I don't know if you can see it there.
Right.
Yeah. So she's mentioned in this story.
I'd love to see
Yeah,
that.
I'll send that to you.
Yeah.
And that's probably me in the 6th grade.
Oh, how cute. I love it.
It's funny, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, wait.
And this is my wife, Bobby, and me with James Earl Jones, and he was here. Me and Bill Clinton.
That's my president.
Me at a neighborhood ceremony, and here with the three of my 4 daughters with Al Sharpton.
Look at Al Sharpton.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And on and on and on.
That goes away back.
It's a lot of story, but I talk
and
about
that's Hartsville, isn't it?
It's a great article, great piece, but reflecting on is a good thing. And I talk about the fact that at Lucille's Kitchen we did. This is why being with Yoji is so important to me now. Even at Lucille's Kitchen, we started our video conferencing, and it says here that our mission was to connect the Lucille's Kitchen audience with Johannesburg and Cape Town, South Africa, to discuss HIV and AIDS in South Africa and in North Minneapolis. And we also did conferences where we discussed criminal justice issues following the close of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission hearings after the collapse of the apartheid system in South Africa. So that was very cool.
And when was that written, Al?
I can't remember when I wrote it. I'll have to look and see when the file was created. I also mentioned that we used the technology. I sent one of my reporters to Berlin, and he interviewed Jews about reparations that they were demanding of the German government because of the theft of life and labor of Jews by the state under the Nakshi regime. And that conversation by video conference preceded a conversation with Randall Robinson, who was with me at Lucille's Kitchen, talking about his book, The Debt, What America Owes to Black People. So it was a great way to localize and to contextualize the question of human dignity, human rights. So we did things too with the Congressional Black Caucus and more. So this is a nice piece. And this is a story I wrote about a Nigerian, French Nigerian who was in town,
Beautiful.
Mina Agosi. And I was reading it again this morning, and I was trying to post it, and I was posting it saying, it does me good to review things I wrote 20, 40 years ago, because they both inspire me in what I'm writing today, but also guide me into what I have to write 20 and 40 years from now. That's the whole point. And when you read these, you'll enjoy them. The interchange and the questions and the responses are wonderful. I'm surprised myself, but that's the power of the spirit. It's also a reflection of the training, of the craft, and what I call the gift. And that's my gift as a communicator, as a journalist, as a witness, and as a scribe. So anyway,
and as a teacher
sharing that with you guys.
An old lady.
Remember this guy here? That's Joseph Phillips, who was on the Cosby Show.
On the Cosby Show, yeah.
And more things. He wrote a book called what's it called? He Talked Like a White Boy. So a great interview with him. And
oh, that's a great picture of you. Go back.
It looks like that was in studio. This was one of my editors at the time, Adrian Hamilton Butler. She was involved in the interview. And then a sister, Vivian Jenkins Nelson, was in the interview as well. She's a neighbor down the street from me, actually, here. And then we also had a person representing a family assets program here in Minnesota. She talked about that. And the beautiful thing is that all these people came from different places, but we found a way to make all these conversations address a single point about the quality of life that we all both experience and desire, and about the kind of community we're obligated to creating. So I had a good time reviewing what I had done and what I'd said and what people had said in response to my questions. This sister, 7 children, 6 children, but she owns a construction company, and told her story. And it all tied into one of the questions that came up here was what the role of men versus women in a family. And that question came about because of Joseph Phillips' statement saying that he visualized himself as the father, the man of the house, standing at the front of the house with the shotgun, protecting his family against all the, potential threats. And I said, well, that's cool. I don't see things that way. It's not me protecting my wife. In my view, I have a sense of Bobby and I as 2 sentient beings that complete each other, that fulfill each other, and that we, in every aspect, stand and move side by side as yin and yang, right? As a completion. And so that was a great discussion to have. I was glad to review it again. I'll just close this out in a second. A piece on the restaurant again, Sunnyside Cafe. And I just love the graphics we used in telling these stories.
The layout is just great.
Check that, just the eggs, it's beautiful.
They even use quotes.
A story about an egg, about eggs, right? Yeah. And this was a story about another brother that was doing food who had a pie business. And he was a corporate guy who left his corporate, started his own business, and it was cool. Anyway, memory lane, fun thing. I'm going to end the share, but I'll share this with you guys. Brother Oliver Williams is here. Brother Oliver, how you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there, Brother Al and Brenda.
Hi.
How are you feeling?
Uh,
How are
I'm
you
doing
feeling?
better.
Okay.
It's amazing what science can do, and what God can do. So
Mhm.
I'm feeling better.
You didn't have COVID, did you, Dr. Williams?
No, I had
Oh.
a pacemaker put in.
Oh,
And
okay.
I had a heart block, and so they had to put the pacemaker in, which was interesting because I fainted and didn't realize I had fainted till I was picking myself up off the ground, and then they checked me out and sent me home. And then when I got home, I started having these episodes where I was about to pass out like every seems like 20 minutes, and so they took me back. And I had an episode when they had me hooked up to everything, and they found out I needed to have a temporary pacemaker, and then the next day they put in the permanent one. And so anyway, I'm blessed to be here, and blessed my family took care of me, and blessed that the emergency room at Regions was wonderful, and
That's good to hear.
yeah, and it's a blessing. So.
Well, we're glad to see you and glad you're doing well.
And I'm glad to be seen.
I hear you.
Hi, Maestra.
I
How
think
you
he's
doing?
muted.
He's talking to you, Yoshi. He was saying hello to you.
Oh, sorry. I was listening to your story, and I was kind of tripping to
Yeah.
how ephemeral things can be.
Yeah.
But I'm glad
Move
that you're
back
here,
just a little.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
me?
Yoshi.
thank you,
Yeah, there we go.
thank you.
Train. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
There you
Perfect.
go.
Well, Dr. Williams, take a minute if you don't mind. I'm so glad you're here. I'm glad you
Yeah.
are here in
Uh-huh. Me
in
too.
the best sense of the word.
Right.
But glad you're here at this moment on this program with me, and I'm glad to see your face and see your energy and your smile. And so I'm smiling with you as you smile. And to the degree that you're willing, walk us through that. You told us a little bit, but you must have been thinking deeply about everything as you experience those moments. So what can you share? And both from the of what happened to you as you observed it, but
Yeah.
then also from your profession as a PhD scientist who looks at healing and systems to make life work for people. So walk us through it, if you would, to the degree that you're able to and willing to.
Yeah. I have been dealing with something like this since January, and didn't know what was going on. So one thing was being able to find a name for it was something that was important for me. And then I think the other thing that I was experiencing is that, I'm trying to figure out a way to be able to control it because I couldn't. And what was fascinating to me, I had a conversation with my son about it, was that, as I was going through the process, trying to find a way to be able to understand it and deal with it. One of the things that was fascinating through the experience was not to, ask God to save me as much as let it be God's will. Because, whatever God wants to have happen for his will to be done with it. And, it's fascinating, I told Sam to tell the medical team that I could feel it coming on, and it didn't feel like it was so much in my heart, which they kept trying to check, as much as it was in my head, because I felt like my eyes were going to roll back in my head, and I was going to I was passing out. And so, so what they did was they started to explain to me. I had what they called a heart block, and my and they said my heart is fine, but it has an electrical problem. And what they needed to do is to find a way to make sure that I got blood pumping throughout my body. And because it wasn't going all the way up to my head, that's when I started to feel like I was going to pass out.
Mm.
And started to continually experience these things. And I was sort of between consciousness and unconsciousness. And I told them when it was about to happen, and so they were able to see it on the machinery. And that's when they knew they needed to do something to put in a temporary pacemaker and then to put in the permanent pacemaker.
The power of technology again, Dr. Williams.
And Medtronics of all places, huh?
Mm-hmm.
And so now I could be, I was supposed to go visit my father-in-law. As you know, you may not know, Sonia's mother passed away in December.
Mm.
And she was a wonderful woman. And so my father-in-law, who's in his 90s, is, by himself.
In San Juan, right?
And actually, it's a town probably about 45 minutes away called Barceloneta. It's near Manatee and Arecibo. And so we needed to go check on him. And so we were scheduled to leave tomorrow. And this stuff started to happen. And so we had to cancel the trip. My father-in-law, but we had to cancel it primarily because my father-in-law got COVID.
At 90.
So it wasn't going to happen. So we had to reschedule that. And my brother and sister-in-law and my aunt-in-law are checking on him because my aunt-in-law lives in the same town.
Mm-hmm.
But my brother and sister-in-law live in Trujillo Alta, which is outside of San Juan, and they live around the block from one another, so they could go check on him, and then the neighbor across the street in Barceloneta would check on him as well, and so we had to postpone the trip.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things that I thought was sort of interesting about it was that they could check in my heart if I was in San Juan, if I was in Africa, if I was in wherever I was in the world, they could check it and get data about what's going on and also tweak it. So I had a doctor's appointment yesterday where they were going through different things to be able to check my heart to increase the heart rate, to decrease the heart rate, to see how much my heart is dependent on the monitor, how much it's not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's fascinating to see, what they can do with it. So they got an iPad, and I'm sitting there, and they're doing all this checking, with me, and it's amazing. But I feel, I still am adjusting, but what's fascinating is that I feel better as a consequence of having it.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that surprised me. So it goes, through my extremities, but it also goes to my heart. And then if they have
I can't remember how a pacemaker looks or works anymore. I kind of have this picture in my mind of an instrument the size of a phone or something like that. And I didn't know if that's something that they put inside your bodies. Is this big or smaller?
Can you see it? See
I
the
do.
scar?
Yeah.
That it's about the size of the head of a face of a watch. and then they have the leads that go into, the your arm, but also go into your heart, and you're awake during the procedure.
That
Oh.
device rests on top of your skin,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
they use
yeah.
and they use other technology to send the leads inside. The leads must be filaments or they're wires or what?
Wires.
And so those are threaded down through your body to the heart area and the other
Correct.
areas.
That's right.
Okay. And
so,
you feel it as they're doing it, or are you anesthetized?
well, they gave me I don't care medication.
Okay.
That's a
So
great
he gave me it's fine with me medication. So
Go do what you got to do, right? Yeah.
that's right. So
oh my goodness, that's cute.
yeah, so
We are in the healing circle, Dr.
yeah,
Williams.
that's
We're
right.
encircling you.
That's right. I needed that medication. So but I could start to feel it when it started to wear off.
Mm-hmm.
But he's right next to me. Now I didn't see all of what he did,
Mm-hmm.
but I could feel that he was doing the things to the pacemaker,
Okay.
and to get it to function properly. And then they sewed it up, and then things will go around it, and it's a part of me now. So I'm pleased with it.
So now you
Amazing.
have to get a dog and walk
Right.
2 and 3 times a day, like I did for 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it was interesting. My son was telling me all the goals that he had for himself, and he says, now I won't have the time to be able to do it. And I said, wait a minute, I'm not planning on going anywhere. So, you can still achieve it. I have a friend who's an endowed chair at Johns Hopkins who's in School of Nursing. And she's wonderful. She's known for her work throughout the world, and so she sent me a note telling me about her father had a pacemaker and lived for 30 years as constant, died of something else. So anyway, it was.
We just don't know.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we're going to encircle you with the healing circle.
Yeah, please do. And I've had my prayer warriors across the United States and other parts of the world to pray for me.
That does help, believe me.
Prayers. Yeah, absolutely.
You mentioned COVID and your father-in-law, right?
Mm-hmm.
At 90 years old. I wanted to raise that question with my brother in Brazil, Yoji. When you returned, what's been the experience of the country in general and our people in particular, as far as you can tell, with the impact of COVID and how we either accept and respond to or take preventive, action to mitigate being impacted by COVID in Brazil? What's it seem like to you?
Well, when I came back here was 2020, December 2020. So it was kind of, was what, 9 months, 10 months after started the pandemic. So here in the state that I live, Bahia, it's a left-wing government instead, in comparison to the federal government that's national. So in most of the states around here, that's called the Northeast region, that what has been historically the less developed area of Brazil. So the governors did a consource to among themselves lead the response to the COVID in contrast to the federal government that it is a negationist government. So here was very proactive and kind of a model of how things should have done. So they, for example, the World Cup soccer stadium got transformed into a field hospital, and And here, part of the health system, there is big hospitals, but also there is there is public unities of health, kind of around the neighborhoods, or hubs, populational hubs. That so that there were a lot of people being treated in those hospital, but the population, with the incentive of the government, was really proactive. So everybody was really taking care of themselves, respecting, social distancing, principally wearing masks. You still see people wearing uh, masks here regularly.
Hmm.
Uh, Even though all the restrictions got lifted. So in this area here, uh, as tragic as it was not as tragic. Could have been, have not have a government leadership that was really focused on the well-being of the people.
Mm.
You know,
And
the measures were very very stringent. You couldn't go to a county to the other. It like was everybody locked down.
Okay.
And there was no resistance. There was not kind of this. You know, Even though the government was negationist, people were scared. Even the right wings were scared enough to follow the guidelines.
right,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
So you had a response in Brazil, but in Africa, they said only 4% of the population is inoculated. And so you didn't have a rapid response to address the issue. So a lot of people were dying in different
Yeah,
parts of Africa.
yes, yes. Here there was the government, federal government was putting blocks to the deployment of the vaccination.
Yeah,
And as I say, the state governors from this area did a consortium, and they start leading the initiative to acquire vaccination and everything. So, and Brazil has been historically, as far as health, a role model as far as deployment of vaccination campaigns. So, in the federal level was lacking at first, you know, and was one of the critics. Brazil being a model that is replicated in other places as far as the reaching of vaccination campaigns was lacking behind. But after that, things they got normalized. Was like a pressure that the federal government couldn't resist. But was kind of funny at the beginning, where the governors were, using the state resource instead of federal resource to acquire vaccination and deploy, instead of use the expertise of the federal government that was much greater. But the vaccination was successful here.
yeah.
I think close 80 or plus percent of the population is vaccinated right now.
Oh, wow.
It's
You
huge.
know,
That's
yeah,
pretty big.
yeah, yeah. Here has been historically, as I say earlier, vaccination in itself was something that works, was successful. So all the diseases that was treated vaccination got eradicated here. So because of the adhesion, the adhesion of the population and the forward posture of the government. So, and with the pandemic, because coincided with having Bolsonaro as a president, thing at the first was difficult to roll out.
Do you think Bolsonaro is going to be reelected?
Oh no,
You see
not
me
not
shaking
wishful
my
thinking,
head.
but you know, uh, all the opinion polls shows Bolsonaro to have a intention of vote of 53% on the first, because here, if there is not enough vote in the first election, then you go to a second turn.
Right.
So they are predicting that Lula is gonna win in the first in the first,
Ballot.
turn.
Okay.
Bolsonaro has a index of rejection, I think around, plus 50. So, he's really unpopular right
Yeah.
now. Just remains faithful to him people who has some kind of some kind of issue.
Right.
you
Right.
know.
Yeah, he's Donald Trump of Brazil.
I was getting
I
ready
think
to
that
say
he's even a notch over, not, but since he don't have the world exposure that Donald Trump had, but I think he's even more dangerous
Right.
than Trump. He's
Right.
an anomaly, a glitch of the matrix.
Yeah.
Hmm.
someone
Like
called
the
him
other
an
one too.
enigma. They didn't know which way he would go. It depended upon the day. That
Well, he's a very funny guy because he talks the usual right-wing white supremacist speech of God, the family. So he's been married 4 times. He was expelled from the army as a captain for planting bombs and also stealing parachutes to make backpacks for surfers. He was always a rogue person. Before being a president, he was for 20 years in the legislature and never presented any legislature. So he was, like uh, a joke kind of guy that
Right.
what he
Like
says
Donald Trump. Like
stays.
Donald Trump.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was sitting up
What
here
he says
thinking,
stuck
he
for a
said,
while and he ran with it.
Yeah.
But he's funny because he's him as president and he has 3 kids, which his kids is go by the number. There's number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, because of his militaristic issues. So two are in the federal chamber, and one is a city council, and that's the difference. Also, for in relationship to Donald Trump, that he has 3 kids already that are politicians, and even though he might probably will disappear, but he gonna have this permanence in the figure of his kid that aroused all these people who has the because you find 2 black people that are very fanatical, poor people that are very fanatical about Bolsonaro.
Mhm.
But is this is an allegory in many ways.
I was listening to a national public radio feature on him a few days ago. And the point that I take away from it is that he successfully created an alliance, a relationship with the fundamental Christian segment of the population. Brazil is mostly Catholic, right? But the Christian,
No, has changed lately.
okay.
That's one thing. The demographic changed in the last 20 years. Brazil used to be the biggest Catholic country, but the evangelicals, the new Pentecostals,
Mm,
has grew in a manner that is incredible. It is really astonished to watch sociologically how it changed, but also it's very dangerous. They are very intolerant. One of the mark of them is to be intolerant. So, for example, the African religion who prosecute people who follow African religion are those evangelicals. They go into temples and destroy and they invade. They're past. So
mm,
where the Catholic are more, the Catholic here in Brazil is very ambiguous, very right.
mhm.
So the evangelical, they are militant, they are extremists, and of course they have much less, I would say, instruction to become a pastor. Anybody is becoming pastor.
Mhm.
So there is a lot of mega churches, Brazilian mega churches, and they are also going to Africa, Portuguese Africa,
Mm.
as missionary. So they are, for example, one of them, the Universal Church of the Kingdom of God, as they called, they've been expelled from Angola, for example, right?
Mm.
Because they are, I mean, they are what's trying to say of Bolsonaro first. They are part of the militia and they are mafia. So the
Wow.
second network of TV here is called Record TV, right? That is pretty big, and they also have the stations in Angola, Mozambique, Guinea-Bissau, Portugal, uh, and they are extremely right wing, extremely Christian, and they have a strong penetration on the population because people here are still very dependent on the networks. That is the hegemonic networks called Global, that is contested by this record. So Global is seen as the liberal left wing, which is not true because they became hegemonic because of a close relationship with the military and the elites, but they do um, propagate uh, that image that even though we have outside of Brazil that extremely liberal beach, bikini, soccer, happiness, carnival, they push a lot of that image where the evangelical they bring this much more ultra conservative,
So,
more but from the beginning of the century kind of,
are they, as you described them, the picture in my mind, Yoji, is that these are almost 21st century Puritans, right?
Yes, yes.
They'd be the modern version of the Puritan movement. And if that is the case, they, as evangelicals, uh, are the newest architects of white supremacist and white power, not only in that culture, but part of the global right-wing conservative, uh, network. And then if that's the case, there probably is a certain complicity, even in the Black community, even in the Afro community, of those who claim the evangelical or Protestant, vision, and they find themselves aligned with the people who represent white supremacy. Am I on the right track or not? What do you think?
Well, this interpretation of reality here in Brazil is not the mainstream because the level of I'll say the instructional population is lower than the United States, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
As I say, public opinion here is very much uh, uh, steered by the networks and the soap operas, right?
Mm-hmm.
So people are ignorant. So as I say also in prior programs with you, this consciousness about the nature of being black, it, it it's more recent here. I would say also it's the last 20 years where the black movement is getting strong and people are claiming to be black, but still you see in the aesthetic choices are very middle class here. Things got kind of confused about race and class, social class. So of course a lot of black people did rose up socially and they adopt certain those middle class values. That
Mm-hmm.
is how white supremacy is disguised. So you know reject everything African, reject African beauty standards. They try to pretend to be more polite. So for example, it's very distinguishable on the street. See who is Catholic or evangelical, because the evangelical, they tie the button up to here. You know, the women wear long long skirts, and you know they and where the other one is more loose. You know, as I say, the Catholics are very ambiguous here. They you know, they don't, they just right now start singing on the masses because it's what the the evangelical use a lot of music and this festivity, right? That is very attractive to Brazilians. And the funny thing too, they adopt a lot of rituals. There are kind of rituals of African religion. So there is the sacred fire, the water, this blessed water. That there's a lot of rituals they create to entice people. But and you know, it is so Brazil is not anymore as it was. There is a lot of people that are openly, all the things that Bolsonaro promotes a lot and has become a issue is the weapons. So he has liberalized the laws of weapons. So there is like triple people with weapons as used to be before, you know, and is starting to happen tragedies, not as much as mass shootings, but a lot of people are getting killed by, you know, menial disputes because one of them have a weapon.
Street violence.
Yeah. So has been one like 2 weeks ago. A law enforcement guy was killed by another law enforcement guy into their club, because the guy who got killed was Lula supporter, and the other one Bolsonaro. So the Bolsonaro people are very vocal. They invade, they scream, they show weapons, because Bolsonaro sign is a weapon sign, right? So in Lula is the L. So imagine. So it's kind of, so there is a lot of this stuff. They are very empowered into occupy those spaces. You know, that the other people, and now there is this fear among the Lula followers, even also to manifest the allegiance, because you might find a crazy one that comes to check what's up, and you know.
It reminds
So
me
other
a little
people
bit
has tendencies to like power,
yeah.
oppression, now find something to rally around.
That reminds me a little bit of the tension in Jamaica when there was conflict between Siaga, representing the JLP, and Michael Manley. And
Yeah.
both camps were flooded with arms, right? And people were in conflict on the streets, or prepared to do conflict on the streets in Jamaica during that time. That's when Bob Marley did the famous concert calling for peace among Jamaicans, right? Yeah. So Oliver, what does it mean from a cultural or a social perspective, the evolution of community? Because what's happening there, someone told me before that in terms of the human rights movement, the African-centered human rights movement, Brazil kind of is like a half a generation back from what the African-American population here experienced. So what we've gone through, Brazil is going through. Maybe because everything accelerates with technology, there won't be the same length of time. Things will change quicker, more broadly. But how does it look to you, Dr. Williams?
Yeah, well, you know, Yoshi, you're going to have to back me up or correct me, but you know, my experience having visited Brazil and the friends that I have in Brazil is that Bolsonaro ended up getting elected because he promised more security, and that people ended up sort of coming to that with him. But there are a lot of people who really hated it, hated him, hated his followers. And what's been interesting to me is that, so you have colorism in the United States, and then, as we've had to deal with things, but you have it in Brazil too. I have a brother. So my dad was really light skinned and with hazel eyes, and from his first marriage, he married a light skinned woman. But my mother was dark skinned, and so what was interesting is the fact that when you have your range of issues, even though I never felt it from my dad, and I felt like he loved me as much as he loved his first four kids, who were all fair skinned. It being in Brazil, if I were there, living there, then it would almost be like we were in two different sets of families, and because people could get treated differently based on their skin color. But what's been interesting to me is seeing the consciousness of Brazilians. So we went to locations where they were former plantations, and so people were talking about how the slave owners ended up doing things where they intermarried, and they intermarried with the slaves, not because they were altruistic or thoughtful, but they didn't want to get killed. So they ended up giving them. Go ahead, Yoshi.
Like my case, my family, my great grandfather is a white guy from they, as they call it, the owners of the land. Portuguese white people has been here for 400 years. Wasn't law, but it was, most cases was rape, those intermarriage, or this light skinned people that came out, as well was in the United States. And in my case, my great grandfather did a strategic uh, uh, choice, because he was a gambler. He got bankrupt, and my great grandmother was wealth. He kind of targeted her as, then he was kind of a swindler kind of person. But I don't, that I disagree with the idea. Intermarriage was a lot of bastard kids, as my grandfather was, and they were unassisted. And so the Portuguese were a little bit less afraid of the black people,
Right.
right? But it's not. Historically, here we have this narrative of racial democracy, and to be indeed is a little bit less aggressive the racism here as in the United States. And as I'll say, we are like a half a generation behind the struggles of African Americans. Things happen there first, and then they percolate down here.
Right.
But and there is also certain people who are very alert and stressed by their nature, because one thing, the colorism here works a lot too, but as I said earlier, here intermingles the race and the colorism, but social class. So
Right.
if you, because of the sheer quantity of black people here that there is here, and because also the white people that is here is not the kind that you have there, that's very clearly blonde here. White people, they are not that blondish. They are what you guys call the Latinos there in the United States. That's white people for us here. Right? So sometimes, yes, for example, I grew up with the idea of it's called what's called improvement of the race, right? To choose to marry somebody lighter skin,
right?
So your kid comes lighter and suffer less discrimination, but also the social issue was much stronger too. So was always look somebody who behaves to be middle class and dresses like middle class and talk like middle class. That is not so folkloric. That is apparently more sophisticated. That is much more important than at first the color of the person.
Mhm.
So we project ourselves how we dress, how and people are watching how we address. They gonna classify which kind of person is this, and they will. It still is very much here. They will following the line. So, for example, a lot of people talk to me as a sir, right? As a pronoun of a sir, that we here use that still very much. We don't, and it's many times it's demonstrating a submission, or because he perceives me to be more educated, or because my clothing are a better quality, this kind of stuff, So then this is why the improvement of black people as black people here is more difficult and more and is lower, because it's not clearly defined as in the United States about race, but here social class enters. So if you are light skinned and low social class, you're gonna receive a treatment that a poor black person will receive equally,
Right.
So, and I think
You're
it's the
saying that a poor white
sophistication
was
of the
treated
system
badly?
here.
You're saying a poor white person, white, whatever that is treated just as badly as a poor black person?
Yes.
Okay. And our story here is that, and I think in Jamaica, a poor white person makes more money than a middle-class black person, and the opportunity for white people, poor or not, is always better. The systems support, white opportunity, white advancement, white advantage, and white people know it. We grew up in the era, Brenda, where people would say they were 3 white and 21,
Yep.
and they meant it. It meant something to them to declare themselves free, white,
Yep.
and an adult, 21. And so whether they were poor or not, they claimed the potential to not be poor because the system, the environment supported them not remaining poor. And then from our side, as black people, we would say, well, there's almost no excuse to be poor and white. You really are in bad shape if you're white and poor, because everything is lined up for you and nothing against you. So I don't know. Listen, this has been a wonderful conversation. Mestre Yoji Sena, as always, brother, thank you for your insight, your view, your voice. And Dr. Oliver Williams, thank you. And, your testimony is healing. Your voice is healing. Yoji, your voice is healing. Brenda, your expectations, your sharing, healing. And so I want to thank each of you for being a part of this conversation. And hopefully someone listening is touched in ways that make the path forward clearer and accessible. So thank you all. Thank you so much. We'll
Thank
see
you.
And Dr.
Have a
Williams,
good
the
weekend.
prayers don't stop.
Say it again, Brenda.
I said the prayers don't stop.
Yeah, please keep
We're
them
gonna
up.
continue praying for that healing. And Senna, thank you for the phrase racial democracy. I've got to think about that.
Yeah, you should look. There is a guy, author, Brazilian sociologist called Gilberto Freire, right? He did a book in the 1930s that set up this idea, this concept of racial democracy, but which is it's not that really that way.
I know, but
yeah,
I need
it's
to
the
think
official
about that
posture
one, though.
of the Brazilian government has been that Brazil is because here, as we say, the other phrase is Brazil has a cordial racism, you know, where the American is more aggressive. But here is Brazil is a cordial racism.
Listen, we have to stop right there. We'll see you all next time. Take care. Thank you all so much.
Have a good weekend.
I'm Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.